Picture this, a dusty afternoon on the edge of a little town. The sun was high in the sky, shining down so hard it felt like it was pressing on your shoulders. The air was thick, like when you're in a room with too many people and not enough windows. It wasn't a fancy town, just a quiet place with old houses, a few shops, and a cracked sidewalk that stretched along the main road. That's where Sarah Miller was walking. Her cane went tap, tap, tap in front of her, slow and steady, like a little drum beat. Sarah couldn't see. She'd been blind since she was a tiny kid, but that didn't scare her or stop her. Nope, Sarah was tough in her own quiet way. Right next to her was Max. Max was her guide dog, and he wasn't just any dog. He was a big, scruffy German shepherd with fur that looked like it hadn't been brushed in a while, but in a cool, messy way. His steps were calm, like he wasn't in a hurry at all, and his tail wagged back and forth, happy as can be. Max had big brown eyes that seemed to look right at you, even if you didn't notice him at first. He stayed close to Sarah, guiding her along that bumpy sidewalk, making sure she didn't trip or wander off. They were a team, Sarah and Max, two buddies who knew each other better than anyone else. Now, if you saw Sarah and Max walking by, you might not think much of it. People in town sure didn't. They'd pass by all the time, old folks heading to the store, kids zooming on bikes, moms pushing strollers, and nobody stopped to stare. To them, Sarah was just a quiet lady with dark sunglasses, tapping her cane, and Max was just a regular dog with a job. "Oh, there's that blind woman and her pup," they'd say, if they said anything at all. Then they'd keep going, not giving her a second look. Just another boring day, right? But here's the thing, they were so wrong. Dead wrong. Sarah and Max weren't what they seemed. Oh no, there was a secret hiding behind those sunglasses and that wagging tail, and it was a big one. A huge one. Let me paint the picture for you a little more, because this day wasn't just any day. The town was small, like I said, with dusty streets and a few scraggly trees that didn't give much shade. The sidewalk Sarah walked on had cracks so wide you could stick your finger in them, and little weeds poked up here and there. The sun made everything hot enough that you'd want a big glass of lemonade if you were out too long. Sarah didn't mind, though. She wore a simple blue dress and those dark sunglasses that covered her eyes. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, swinging a little as she walked. She moved slow but sure, like she knew exactly where she was going, even if she couldn't see it. Max kept perfect pace with her. His big paw slapped the ground softly, and his ears flicked every now and then, catching sounds like a car rumbling by or a bird chirping in the distance. He wore a harness, the kind guide dogs have, with a handle Sarah held onto. It was brown and a little worn, but it did the job. Max didn't pull or tug. He just stayed right by her side, like he was saying, "I've got you, Sarah. We're good." If you looked close, you might notice his fur was a mix of black and brown, with a few gray spots around his face. He wasn't a young pup anymore, but he didn't act old either. He had this energy, this quiet strength, that made you feel like he could do anything if he wanted to. So there they were, walking along on that hot, dusty day. The town hummed around them, cars rolling slow, a dog barking somewhere far off, the buzz of a lawnmower down the street. People went about their lives, not paying much attention. There was Mr. Jenkins, the old guy who ran the hardware store, sweeping his steps. He waved at Sarah like he always did, even though she couldn't see it. "Afternoon, Sarah," he called out, his voice creaky but kind. Sarah smiled a little and nodded. "Afternoon, Mr. Jenkins," she said back, her voice soft but clear. Max wagged his tail harder, like he was saying hi too. Then there was little Tommy, a kid with a red cap who rode his bike up and down the street all day. He zoomed past, shouting, "Hi, Sarah." "Hi, Max." Sarah chuckled, and Max's ears perked up. Tommy didn't stop, he never did, but he liked seeing them. To him, they were just part of the town, like the big oak tree by the park or the mailbox that leaned a little to the left. Nobody thought Sarah and Max were special. Nobody thought they were different. And that's exactly how Sarah liked it. She didn't want attention. She didn't want people staring or asking questions. She just wanted to live her life, her and Max, doing their thing. But let's slow down for a second. Let's talk about Sarah a bit more, because she's the heart of the story. Sarah Miller wasn't loud or flashy. She wasn't the kind of person who'd run around yelling or making big scenes. She was quiet, super quiet. If you sat next to her, you might not even notice her at first. She had this way of blending in, like she was part of the background. Her blue dress was plain, her sneakers were old, and those sunglasses? They were just regular black ones, nothing fancy. But there was something about her. If you really looked, you'd see it, a little spark, a little toughness. She wasn't weak, even if she couldn't see. She'd been blind for years, ever since a sickness took her sight when she was 5. Back then, it was hard. She'd cry sometimes, wishing she could see the sky or her mom's face. But she got tougher. She learned to listen, to feel, to move through the world in her own way. And Max? Oh, Max was her rock. She got him years ago, when he was trained to be a guide dog. The day they met, she knew he was special. He didn't just lead her around, he made her feel safe, like nothing could hurt her as long as he was there. Max wasn't loud either. He didn't bark at every little thing or chase squirrels like some dogs. He was calm, steady, like a big brother watching out for you. His tail wagged a lot, sure, but his eyes. Those eyes were sharp. They didn't miss a thing. If a leaf fell across the street, Max saw it. If a stranger walked by too close, Max noticed. He was always watching, always ready, even if nobody else could tell. Back to that dusty afternoon. Sarah and Max were heading somewhere simple, maybe the little store on the corner to grab some bread, or maybe just taking a walk to stretch their legs. It didn't matter much where they were going, because the real story wasn't about that. It was about what was coming. See, this wasn't just another boring day. Nope, this day was different. Something big was waiting around the corner, something nobody in town saw coming, especially not the people who thought Sarah and Max were nothing special. They were wrong, so wrong, and they were about to find out why. Let's zoom out a little more. That town wasn't the kind of place where big things happened. It was sleepy, slow, the kind of spot where everyone knew everyone. There was the diner with the wobbly sign that said best pie around, even though the pie was just okay. There was the gas station where old guys sat on benches, talking about the weather. And there was the park with a rusty swing set that creaked when you sat on it. Nothing exciting, right? Days went by the same way, sun up, sun down, same old stuff. Kids went to school, grown UPS went to work, dogs chased cats. Normal, boring, predictable. But Sarah and Max? They didn't fit that boring mold, even if nobody knew it yet. They looked normal, sure. Sarah with her cane, Max with his harness, just a blind lady and her dog, walking along like always. People saw them every day, and nobody wondered about them. Nobody asked, hey, what's their story? Nobody thought, maybe there's more to them than meets the eye. They just kept going, living their lives, not caring. And that was fine with Sarah. She didn't need them to care. She didn't need them to notice. She had Max, and Max had her, and that was enough. Or was it? See, here's where things get fun. That dusty afternoon wasn't going to stay quiet for long. Something was rumbling, something loud, something tough, something that was going to shake things up. Sarah didn't know it yet, and neither did Max, but trouble was coming. Big trouble. The kind of trouble that rolls in on 2 wheels, with engines roaring and attitudes stinking up the place. And when that trouble met Sarah and Max, well, let's just say it wasn't going to go the way anyone expected. Think about it for a sec. What do you picture when you see Sarah and Max? Just a regular lady and her dog, right? That's what everyone thought. That's what the town thought. That's what the troublemakers thought too. But they were all missing something, something huge. Behind those dark sunglasses, Sarah had a strength nobody saw. And behind that wagging tail, Max had a secret nobody guessed. What was it? Oh, you'll find out soon, I promise. This story's about to get wild, and you're not going to want to miss a single second of it. So, what do you think so far? Does Sarah sound like someone ordinary to you? Just a quiet lady with a cane and a dog? Or do you feel it like maybe, just maybe, there's something more? Stick around, because this is only the beginning. This dusty afternoon is about to turn into something crazy, something you'll never forget. Sarah and Max are ready. Are you? It was a regular day for Sarah and Max, just like any other. The sun was still shining, the air was still dusty, and they were minding their own business, walking along that cracked sidewalk in their little town. Sarah's cane went tap, tap, tap as she moved, slow and steady, her dark sunglasses hiding her eyes. Max trotted beside her, his big paws slapping the ground, his tail wagging just a little. They weren't bothering anybody. They weren't looking for trouble. They were just doing their thing, like always. But trouble? Oh, trouble has a funny way of finding you, even when you don't want it. That's when it happened. Trouble rolled into town literally. It came loud and fast, rumbling like thunder. A gang of bikers roared down the street on their big, shiny motorcycles. Their engines growled so loud you could feel it in your chest, like when a big truck drives by too close. These weren't nice guys. Nope, not even a little. They wore black leather jackets that looked tough and mean, covered in patches and zippers. Their boots were heavy, stomping the ground when they stopped. And their bikes? Huge, with handlebars that curved up high and pipes that puffed out gray smoke. They pulled up right near the corner store, the little shop where Sarah sometimes bought bread or a candy bar. The whole town could hear them coming, and people peeked out their windows to see what was going on. The leader of this gang was a guy named Razor. Razor wasn't his real name, of course, but it's what everyone called him because he acted sharp and dangerous, like a blade. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and a mean grin that showed his teeth. His hair was greasy, hanging over his eyes, and he had a voice that barked loud, like he thought he owned the whole world. "Park 'em here," he shouted to his buddies, waving his hand like a king giving orders. His gang, 5 or 6 other guys, did what he said, lining up their bikes in a row. They laughed and slapped each other's backs, acting like they were the coolest people around. The noise was so loud it made dogs bark and kids run inside. These guys didn't care who they bothered. They just wanted everyone to know they were here. Sarah and Max were just across the street when this all went down. They were crossing over to the other side, heading toward home maybe, or just taking their usual walk. Sarah's cane tapped the ground, and Max stayed right by her side, his harness jingling a little. They didn't stop or look up at the noise. They didn't have to. Sarah couldn't see the bikers, and Max didn't seem to care. But the bikers? Oh, they noticed Sarah. Razor's sharp eyes locked onto her right away. He leaned against his bike, crossing his arms, that mean grin getting wider. "Well, well, well," he said, loud enough for his buddies to hear. "What do we got here?" Then he shouted it. "Hey, lady." His voice cut through the air like a whip. Sarah kept walking, her cane tapping, but Razor wasn't the kind of guy who liked being ignored. He pointed at her and laughed a big, nasty laugh that made his gang turn and look. "What's a blind chick like you doing out here alone?" he yelled. "That mutt gonna save you." His buddies roared with laughter, slapping their knees and hooting like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. They revved their bikes vroom, vroom, making the engines growl even louder, like they were part of the joke. The noise bounced off the buildings, filling the street with their meanness. Now, let's freeze that moment for a second. Picture it, Sarah, a quiet lady in a blue dress and dark sunglasses, just walking along. Max, her big, scruffy dog, trotting beside her, calm as can be. And then these bikers, loud, rude, and full of themselves, making fun of her like she was some kind of toy. If you were there, watching from the sidewalk, what would you think? Would you feel mad for Sarah? Would you want to tell those bikers to shut up? Or would you just watch, waiting to see what happened next? Because something was going to happen. You could feel it, like when the air gets heavy before a storm. Sarah didn't flinch. Not even a little. She didn't jump or gasp or turn around. She just kept walking, her cane going tap, tap, tap like nothing was wrong. Her face didn't change, no frown, no smile, just calm. Max stayed close, his tail still wagging a tiny bit, his big paws keeping time with her steps. They didn't speed up or slow down. They didn't act scared. It was like the bikers' noise and mean words bounced right off them, like rain sliding off a window. But Razor? He didn't like that. Oh no, he didn't like that at all. See, Razor was the kind of guy who loved attention. He wanted people to look at him, to jump when he yelled, to act like he was the boss. When Sarah didn't stop, didn't answer, didn't even turn her head, it made him mad. His grin turned into a scowl, and his eyes got narrow, like a cat about to pounce. "Hey," he shouted again, louder this time. "You deaf too?" His buddies laughed some more, egging him on. One of them, a short guy with a big belly, yelled, "Maybe her dog's blind too." Another one, with a scruffy ponytail, added, "Yeah, look at that dumb mutt." They kept going, tossing mean words back and forth, revving their bikes louder and louder. But Razor wasn't done. Oh no, he wasn't going to let this go. He hopped off his bike, his boots hitting the ground with a loud thud. He swaggered over, walking all big and tough, like he owned the street. His leather jacket creaked, and his heavy steps crunched the gravel. He moved fast, cutting across the road, and planted himself right in Sarah's path. She didn't see him, of course, but she heard him coming. Her cane tapped once, twice, then stopped when it bumped his boot. Max stopped too, standing still, his head tilting just a tiny bit. Razor leaned in close, too close, his shadow falling over Sarah. "I'm talking to you," he snapped, his voice sharp and loud, like a dog barking right in your face. "Let's slow down again. Imagine you're Sarah. You can't see this big, mean guy in front of you, but you can hear him. You can feel his breath, smell the leather and smoke on him. Your cane's touching his boot, and he's yelling at you. What would you do? Would you yell back? Would you run? Or would you stay calm, like Sarah did?" Because Sarah didn't move. She didn't shake or cry or back away. Her face stayed steady, like a rock in a river. She stood there, quiet, her hand still on Max's harness. And Max? He didn't bark or growl, not yet. But his ears twitched, just a little, like he was listening hard. His big brown eyes flicked up to Razor, watching him close. Something was brewing. Something big. Razor didn't notice Max's ears. He didn't care about the dog. To him, Max was just a scruffy mutt, nothing special, nothing scary. He kept his eyes on Sarah, leaning closer, his voice dropping low and mean. "You think you're too good to talk to me, huh?" he said. "You and your stupid dog, walking around like you own this place." He laughed again, but it wasn't a happy laugh, it was cold, like ice. His buddies stayed by their bikes, watching, grinning, waiting to see what he'd do next. One of them shouted, "Show her, Razor." Another revved his engine again, vroom, like it was a cheer. The street got quiet for a second, just long enough to hear the wind rustling the trees. People in town were watching now. Mr. Jenkins, the old hardware store guy, peeked out his window, his broom still in his hand. Little Tommy, the kid with the red cap, stopped his bike down the block, staring with wide eyes. Even the birds stopped chirping, like they knew something was up. Sarah and Max were stuck there, with Razor blocking their way, his big body like a wall. He wasn't going to move. He wasn't going to let them pass. He wanted to scare her, to make her jump, to prove he was tougher than some blind lady and her dog. But Sarah? She wasn't scared. She didn't say a word, not yet. She just stood there, her cane resting against Razor's boot, her other hand holding Max's harness. Max didn't move either, but his ears kept twitching, and his tail stopped wagging. His body got a little stiff, like he was ready to spring. If you looked close, really close, you'd see his eyes weren't soft anymore. They were sharp, focused, like he was sizing Razor up. Razor didn't see it. His buddies didn't see it. They were too busy laughing, too busy being loud, too busy thinking they were in charge. So here's the big question, can you guess what's coming next? Think about it. Sarah's calm, Max is watching, and Razor's acting like a bully who's never lost a fight. What happens when a tough guy picks on the wrong person or the wrong dog? Something's brewing, something wild, and it's going to shake this dusty little town to its core. Stick around, because this is just the start. The real fun's about to begin. The bikers didn't let up. Not even a little. After that first day when Razor yelled at Sarah and blocked her path, you'd think they'd get bored and leave her alone. Nope. Those guys were like flies buzzing around a picnic, they just kept coming back. Over the next few days, they showed up everywhere Sarah went. It was like they were following her, waiting to make trouble. And they were loud about it too, really loud. Their big motorcycles roared through the little town, making windows shake and dogs bark. People started whispering about them, saying things like, "Who are these guys, And why won't they go away? But Sarah? She didn't say a word. She just kept doing her thing, like they weren't even there. It started at the park. The park was a small place with a rusty swing set, a slide that squeaked, and a big oak tree that gave some shade. Sarah liked going there sometimes, just to sit on a bench and feel the breeze. Max would sit by her feet, his tail wagging slow, sniffing the air. It was peaceful until the bikers rolled in. One afternoon, Sarah was there, her cane resting against the bench, when she heard that rumble. Vroom, vroom. The motorcycles tore into the park, kicking up dust and making the birds fly away. Razor was in front, his mean grin flashing as he stopped his bike right by her bench. "Lost your way again, huh?" he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. His buddies laughed, leaning on their bikes, watching like it was a show. Sarah didn't move. She didn't look up, she couldn't see them anyway. Her dark sunglasses stayed on, and her face stayed calm. She just sat there, hands in her lap, like she was waiting for them to leave. Max didn't move either, but his ears flicked up, and his tail stopped wagging. Razor hopped off his bike, his boots crunching the gravel, and walked closer. "What's the matter, lady?" "Too scared to talk," he said, his voice all mocking and mean. The other bikers hooted, revving their engines vroom, like it was a big joke. Sarah didn't answer. She just stood up slow, grabbed her cane, and started walking away, Max right by her side. Razor laughed louder. "Yeah, run away, you and your dumb dog," he called after her. But Sarah wasn't running. She was just leaving. The next day, it happened again at the grocery store. The store was tiny, with a bell that jingled when you walked in and shelves full of cereal and canned soup. Sarah went there a lot to grab little things: bread, milk, maybe a treat for Max. She'd walk down the aisles, her cane tapping, Max guiding her like always. That day, she was reaching for a loaf of bread when the door jingled hard, too hard. Boots stomped in, and that mean laugh filled the air. "Hey, blind chick." Razor's voice boomed. "Lost again, huh?" Sarah kept her hand on the bread, feeling it with her fingers, not turning around. Max stood still, his big body between her and the bikers. Razor swaggered over, his buddies crowding behind him. "What's that dog doing?" "Shopping for you," he sneered. The short guy with the big belly laughed so hard he snorted. "Yeah, he looks dumber than you," another one said, the guy with the scruffy ponytail. They kept going, tossing mean words like they were throwing rocks. The store lady, Mrs. Carter, peeked over the counter, her eyes wide, but she didn't say anything. She was too scared. Sarah didn't flinch, though. She picked up the bread, put it in her basket, and turned to leave. Razor stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You're no fun, lady," he said, all grumpy like. Sarah didn't answer. She just paid Mrs. Carter and walked out, Max leading the way. The bikers laughed and followed her to the door, yelling more stuff, but she didn't stop. Then it got worse. They showed up outside her little house. Sarah lived in a small place at the edge of town, a white house with chipped paint and a creaky porch. It had a tiny yard with a few flowers she couldn't see but liked to smell. She and Max would sit out there sometimes, just listening to the crickets. But one night, that quiet got ruined. The bikers rolled up, their engines growling loud, parking right on her street. Razor leaned on his bike, lighting a cigarette, and shouted, "Hey, blind girl. That dog gonna save you now." His buddies chuckled, kicking dirt, acting tough. Sarah was inside, but she heard them through the open window. She didn't go out. She didn't yell back. She just sat in her chair, petting Max, her face calm as ever. See, that's the thing about Sarah, she never answered back. Not once. No matter how loud they got, no matter how mean they were, she kept going about her day. She'd walk to the park, the store, or just around town, her cane tapping, Max by her side. The bikers would show up, yelling stuff like, "Lost your way again, huh," or "That mutt's useless," and she'd act like they were invisible. People in town started noticing. Mr. Jenkins, the old hardware guy, would shake his head and mutter, "Those boys need to leave her alone." Little Tommy, the kid with the red cap, would watch from his bike, frowning. Even Mrs. Carter at the store whispered to her customers, "Poor Sarah. She doesn't deserve this. But Sarah? She didn't complain. She didn't cry. She just kept going. But here's the thing, Max wasn't just sitting there. Oh no, Max was doing something, even if nobody noticed at first. If you looked really close, you'd see his eyes. Those big brown eyes weren't soft and sleepy anymore. They were sharp, like a hawk watching a mouse. Every time the bikers showed up, Max watched them. His ears would perk up, catching every word they said, every laugh, every rev of their engines. His tail might wag a little, just to look friendly, but his eyes? They were locked on those guys, tracking every move they made. He didn't bark or jump or run at them, not yet. He just watched, quiet and steady, like he was waiting for something. One day, it got real close. Sarah was walking home from the store, a little bag of groceries in her hand, her cane tapping the sidewalk. Max was right beside her, his harness jingling softly. The street was quiet until it wasn't. That rumble came again, loud and fast. The bikers zoomed up, cutting her off, their bikes blocking the way. Razor jumped off his, stomping over with that mean grin. "Hey, lady," he shouted. "You're in my way." He got too close and shoved Sarah's shoulder. Not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough to make her stumble a step. Her bag slipped, and a couple apples rolled onto the ground. That's when Max moved. He didn't bark loud or lunge. He just let out a low growl, real low, like a rumble you feel more than hear. His lips didn't even show his teeth, but that sound stopped Razor cold. The biker stepped back quick, his grin slipping for just a second. Then he laughed loud and fake. "What's he gonna do, bite me?" he sneered, looking at his buddies like it was all a big joke. They laughed too, but it wasn't as loud this time. Sarah bent down slow, picked up her apples, and put them back in her bag. She didn't say a word. She just stood up, patted Max, and kept walking. Razor watched her go, still laughing, but his eyes flicked to Max, just for a moment. That growl wasn't loud, but it was something. It was a hint, a tiny little clue that Max wasn't just some regular dog. Razor didn't think much of it, he was too busy acting tough. His buddies didn't think much of it either, they just revved their bikes and followed him off, yelling more mean stuff as they went. But if you were there, if you heard that growl, you might wonder. What was Max really up to? Was he just annoyed, or was he warning them? And Sarah, what about that faint little smile on her face? It was small, so small you could miss it, but it was there. Like she knew something they didn't. Like she wasn't worried at all. Every night, when the town went quiet, something else happened. The bikers would leave, the streets would empty, and Sarah's little house would get still. No more engines, no more yelling, just crickets and the soft hum of the wind. Sarah would sit in her chair by the window, Max lying at her feet. She'd pet his scruffy fur, running her fingers over his ears, and whisper to him. Her voice was so quiet you couldn't hear the words unless you were right there. What was she saying? Was she telling him about the bikers? Was she making a plan? Or was she just talking to her best friend, like she always did? Max would lift his head, his sharp eyes looking up at her, like he understood every word. His tail would thump the floor once or twice, slow and steady. The town didn't see this part. They didn't know about the whispers, the growls, the way Max watched those bikers like a hawk. They just saw Sarah and her dog, getting picked on day after day. People felt bad, sure, but nobody stepped in. Mr. Jenkins thought about calling the sheriff once, but he didn't. Little Tommy wanted to yell at the bikers, but he was too small. Mrs. Carter just shook her head and said, "Poor Sarah," over and over. They didn't know what was coming. They didn't know the truth was about to explode big time. So, what do you think? Was Sarah planning something sneaky with Max? Or was Max more than just a guide dog, like, way more? Those bikers kept pushing, kept laughing, kept acting like they were the toughest guys around. But Max's growl, Sarah's smile, those quiet whispers at night, they were little clues, tiny sparks, leading up to something huge. Keep watching, because this story's about to get wild. The truth? Oh, it's coming, and it's going to shake everything up. The days had been tough for Sarah and Max. Those mean bikers wouldn't leave them alone, yelling, laughing, showing up everywhere like a bad shadow. But one evening, everything changed. It wasn't just another day of teasing. Nope, this was the night the bikers decided they'd had enough of playing nice. They wanted to do more than just shout. They wanted to scare Sarah for real, to show her who was boss. And that's when it all went down big time. Picture this, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange and pink. The little town was winding down, kids were inside, shops were closing, and the streets were getting quiet. Sarah was walking home from the park, her cane tapping the ground, Max trotting beside her like always. They cut through an empty parking lot near the old gas station, a big, open space with cracked pavement and a few weeds poking up. Nobody was around. The lot was silent, just the sound of Sarah's cane tap, 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 and Max's soft steps. It felt peaceful, like the end of a long day. But peace? Oh, it wasn't going to last. That's when the rumble started. It came from far off at first, like a storm rolling in. Then it got louder, vroom, vroom, and closer. Sarah stopped, her head tilting a little, listening. Max's ears perked up, his tail going still. The bikers were coming. Their engines roared through the quiet, shaking the air, making the ground buzz under Sarah's feet. She didn't move, just stood there with her cane, her dark sunglasses hiding her eyes. Max stayed by her side, his big body steady, like he was ready for anything. The bikers zoomed into the parking lot, fast and loud. There were 6 of them, their big motorcycles gleaming under the fading sunlight. Their leather jackets creaked, and their chains rattled as they swung off their bikes. They spread out, circling Sarah and Max like wolves around a campfire. The engines kept growling, even after they parked, vroom, vroom, like they wanted the noise to scare her. Dust kicked up around them, swirling in the air, making the lot feel smaller, tighter. Sarah was trapped in the middle, her blue dress fluttering a little in the breeze, Max standing close enough that his fur brushed her leg. Razor was in front, like always. He stepped off his bike, his heavy boots hitting the ground with a loud thud. He cracked his knuckles, pop, pop, and grinned that mean grin of his. His beard was scruffy, his eyes narrow, and his voice came out sharp and nasty. "Time to teach you a lesson, lady," he said, slow and loud, like he wanted her to feel every word. He took a step closer, his shadow falling over Sarah, his big hand reaching for her arm. His buddies watched, smirking, waiting to see what he'd do. The short guy with the big belly chuckled. The one with the scruffy ponytail jingled his chains. They thought this was it. Razor was finally going to show Sarah who was tougher. Sarah didn't flinch. Her cane stayed still, touching the ground, her other hand on Max's harness. Razor's fingers were inches from her arm, close enough that she could feel the heat off him. His grin got wider, like he was winning already. The air felt heavy, like something big was about to snap. The bikers leaned in, engines rumbling, ready to laugh when Sarah jumped or cried. But then bam, it happened. Max moved. And when I say he moved, I mean he moved fast, like lightning. In a blur, Max lunged. 1 second he was standing calm by Sarah, the next he was on Razor. His big paws hit the biker's chest, knocking him flat to the ground with a loud thump. Max pinned him there, his strong legs holding Razor down like he weighed nothing. A snarl ripped out of Max's throat, a deep, loud growl that shook the air, like thunder right in your ears. His teeth flashed, sharp and white, inches from Razor's face. The sound wasn't just a growl, it was a warning, a promise, something wild and fierce that made your heart skip. The other bikers froze. Their jaws dropped, hanging open like doors off hinges. The short guy stopped chuckling. The ponytail guy dropped his chain clank onto the pavement. Their eyes got wide, staring at Max like they'd never seen a dog before. Razor was flat on his back, his arms pinned under Max's paws, his mean grin gone. He looked up at Max, his face pale, his breath fast and shaky. Max didn't budge. He held Razor there, snarling low, his fur bristling, his eyes locked on the biker like he could see right through him. The parking lot went quiet, dead quiet, except for that growl and the soft rumble of the bikes. Sarah straightened up. She'd been still this whole time, calm as a rock, but now she moved. She pulled her shoulders back, standing tall, her cane resting easy in her hand. Her voice came out steady, strong, like steel you can't bend. "You should have left us alone," she said, clear and loud, cutting through the silence. Every word hit like a hammer. The bikers turned their heads, staring at her now Not just Max. Razor blinked up from the ground, his mouth opening, but no sound came out. Sarah wasn't done. She took a slow breath and dropped the big surprise. Max isn't just my guide dog, she said. He's a retired Navy SEAL K9. Trained to take down guys tougher than you. Boom. There it was, the truth, out in the open, like a firecracker popping in the dark. Razor's eyes went wide, bigger than dinner plates. His tough guy act? It crumbled right there, like a sandcastle under a wave. He stared up at Max, then at Sarah, his face a mix of shock and fear. The other bikers didn't move, they couldn't. A Navy SEAL K9? That's not just a dog, that's a hero, a fighter, trained by the toughest people in the world. Max wasn't some scruffy mutt. He was a soldier, a protector, and he just proved it. Max growled again, low and deep, his teeth still close to Razor's face. The sound made the bikers flinch, like they'd been slapped. Suddenly, they didn't look so brave. The short guy took a step back, his belly jiggling. The ponytail guy's hands shook, his chain forgotten on the ground. Another biker, a skinny one with a scar on his cheek, muttered, Razor, like he didn't know what to do. Their engines kept rumbling, but the noise felt small now, weak compared to Max's snarl. Who's laughing now, huh? Not them. Not anymore. Let's rewind a sec and soak this in. Picture Razor, flat on his back, dust all over his fancy leather jacket. Max standing over him, big and strong, his paws pressing down like anchors. Sarah next to them, calm and sure, her voice ringing out clear. The bikers around them, frozen like statues, their tough act falling apart. The parking lot was still, no cars, no people, just this wild moment. The sun was almost gone now, the sky turning purple, shadows stretching long across the pavement. If you were there, hiding behind a bush or peeking from a window, what would you think? Would you cheer for Max? Would you gasp at Sarah's words? Because this wasn't just a fight, this was a reveal, a big, jaw-dropping twist. Razor finally found his voice. "Gee, get him off me," he stammered, his words all wobbly. He squirmed under Max, but Max didn't budge. His growl got softer, but his eyes stayed sharp, watching Razor like a hawk. Sarah tilted her head a little, like she was thinking. "You pushed us too far," she said, her voice still steady. "Max doesn't like bullies. Neither do I." She didn't yell or cry, she didn't have to. Her words were enough, strong and true, hitting the bikers like a punch they didn't see coming. The bikers started whispering to each other, low and fast. "Navy SEAL," the short guy said, his voice squeaky. "That dog's a soldier," the ponytail guy muttered, scratching his head. The skinny one shook his head, like he didn't believe it. No way, he kept saying. But it was real. Max wasn't just trained to guide Sarah, he was trained to fight, to protect, to take down bad guys way meaner than Razor. All those days of teasing, shoving, laughing, they didn't know who they were messing with. And now they did. Max stayed on Razor a little longer, just to make sure he got the point. His growl faded, but his weight kept the biker pinned. Razor stopped squirming, his hands flat on the ground, his breath puffing out in little gasps. Okay, he said, his voice high and scared. "Call him off. Please." Sarah didn't move right away. She let him sweat, let him feel that fear, the same fear he'd tried to put on her. Then she gave a tiny nod. "Max," she said, soft but firm. "Enough." Max stepped off, slow and easy, like he was in no hurry. He backed up to Sarah's side, sitting down with a huff, his ears still up, his eyes still watching. Razor scrambled to his feet, brushing dust off his jacket, his face red and sweaty. He didn't look tough anymore, he looked small, shaky, like a kid caught doing something bad. His buddies didn't help him up. They just stood there, staring at Max, then at Sarah, then back at Max. The air felt different now, tense, but not scary for Sarah. Scary for them. Sarah adjusted her grip on her cane, standing tall. "Go home," she said, her voice quiet but heavy. "And don't come back." Razor rubbed his chest where Max's paws had been, his eyes darting around. He opened his mouth, like he wanted to argue, but one look at Max shut him up. Max tilted his head, letting out a tiny growl, just a little one, like a reminder. Razor swallowed hard, nodded fast, and turned to his bike. "Let's go," he mumbled to his gang, his voice all weak. The bikers didn't argue. They grabbed their helmets, jumped on their bikes, and revved the engine's vroom, but it wasn't loud and proud anymore. It was fast and scared. The motorcycles peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing, dust flying everywhere. They didn't look back. Sarah stood there, listening as the rumble faded, her cane tapping once against the ground. Max wagged his tail just a little like he was saying, "Job done." The lot went quiet again, just the two of them, the hero lady and her hero dog, standing strong in the twilight. "So, what do you think? Who's laughing now, huh? Not Razor, that's for sure." The bikers thought they were big and tough, but Max showed them fast and fierce that they picked the wrong fight. And Sarah? She didn't even need to raise her voice. She let Max do the talking, and oh boy, did he talk. This was the big moment, the huge reveal, and it's just the start of the end for those bikers. Stick around, because this story's got more to give. The bikers' engines faded into the distance, their loud vroom vroom turning into a tiny hum, then nothing at all. The parking lot was quiet again, just Sarah and Max standing there, the dust settling around them like a soft blanket. The sun was gone now, the sky all purple and dark, with a few stars peeking out. Sarah tilted her head, listening to the silence, her cane resting easy in her hand. Max sat by her side, his big scruffy head held high, his tail giving a little wag like he was proud of himself. And he should be. He'd just taken down Razor, the meanest biker in town, like it was no big deal. Let's back up a bit and really picture this. Razor was still on the ground just a minute ago, his leather jacket all dusty, his face white as a sheet. Max had him pinned, those strong paws pressing him down, that snarl echoing in the air. The other bikers, those tough guys with their chains and loud bikes, stood there like statues, their mouths hanging open. Sarah's words, "Max is a retired Navy SEAL K9, hit them like a big splash of cold water. They didn't expect that, not in a million years. They thought Max was just a regular dog, a scruffy mutt who helped a blind lady get around. Boy, were they wrong. Now, with the bikers gone, Sarah took a slow breath. She didn't smile big or laugh or jump around, she didn't need to. She just stood there, calm and steady, like she knew this would happen all along. Max looked up at her, his big brown eyes shining in the dim light, like he was checking on her. "Good boy," she said soft, reaching down to pat his head. Her fingers ran through his messy fur, scratching behind his ears. Max's tail wagged harder, thump, thump against the pavement, and he let out a little huff, like he was saying, "No problem, Sarah. I got this." The parking lot felt big again without the bikers crowding it. The cracked pavement stretched out around them, empty and still. The old gas station nearby had its lights off, closed for the night, and the weeds in the lot swayed a little in the breeze. It was just Sarah and Max now, the two of them against the world, or at least against a gang of mean bikers. If you were hiding nearby, maybe behind that rusty dumpster across the street, you'd see how strong they looked together. Sarah with her cane, Max with his harness, they didn't seem scared or weak. They seemed unbeatable. But let's think about those bikers for a second. Razor and his gang didn't just leave, they ran. Well, rode away fast, anyway. Picture them zooming off, their big tough bikes squealing around corners, their leather jackets flapping in the wind. Razor was probably in front, his hands tight on the handlebars, his heart thumping like a drum. He didn't look back, not once. He couldn't. He'd just been flattened by a dog. And not just any dog, but a Navy SEAL K9. That's the kind of dog that chases bad guys, jumps out of planes, and protects soldiers. Razor thought he was the toughest guy around, but Max was tougher by a mile. The other bikers weren't much better. The short guy with the big belly was probably yelling, "What just happened?" as they sped off, his voice all high and squeaky. The ponytail guy might have been shaking his head, muttering, "I didn't sign up for this." The skinny one with the scar, well, he was quiet, just gripping his bike, his eyes wide like he'd seen a ghost. They'd laughed at Sarah and Max for days, called them names, shoved her, acted big and bold. Now, they weren't laughing. They were scared, plain and simple, and they didn't want to stick around to see what Max would do next. Back in the parking lot, Sarah started walking again. Her cane went tap, tap, tap on the pavement, slow and sure, like nothing had happened. Max trotted beside her, his harness jingling a little, his ears up and alert. They weren't in a hurry. They didn't need to be. The bikers were gone, and the night was theirs. Sarah's blue dress swayed as she moved, her dark sunglasses still on, hiding her eyes. She didn't say much, just that one little good boy to Max, but you could tell she was proud. Proud of her dog, proud of herself, proud they'd stood up to those bullies without even breaking a sweat. If you think about it, this moment was big. Huge. For days, those bikers had been picking on Sarah, following her around, making her life hard. They'd yell stuff like, "Lost your way, huh," or "That dog's dumber than you," and laugh like it was the funniest thing ever. Sarah never fought back, not with words, anyway. She just kept going, day after day, her cane tapping, Max by her side. But this was different. This was the night they pushed too far, and Max showed them what he was really made of. It wasn't just a fight, it was a surprise, a secret popping out like a jack in the box. Let's imagine what was going through Sarah's head right then. She couldn't see the bikers running off, but she could hear it, the engines fading, the squeal of tires, the quiet coming back. She'd known Max was special from the day they met. He wasn't just a guide dog to her, he was her friend, her protector, her hero. Maybe she'd been waiting for this, deep down. Maybe she knew the bikers would go too far one day, and Max would step up. Or maybe she didn't plan it at all, just trusted Max to do what he was trained for. Either way, she wasn't surprised. That little pat on his head, that good boy, it was like she'd seen it coming all along. And Max? Oh, Max was cool as ice. He didn't bark or chase the bikers as they left. He didn't need to. He'd done his job, knocked Razor down, scared them silly, and sent them running. Now he was back to being Sarah's guide dog, wagging his tail, walking her home like it was just another night. But those sharp eyes of his? They didn't miss a thing. He glanced around the parking lot, checking the shadows, making sure no one else was sneaking up. Navy SEAL K9s don't mess around, they're always ready, even when they look relaxed. The town wasn't asleep yet. People had heard the noise, the engines, the snarl, the bikers peeling out. Windows were open, and a few folks peeked out to see what was up. Mr. Jenkins, the old hardware store guy, was on his porch down the street, squinting into the dark. What in tarnation was that, he mumbled, his broom still in his hand. Little Tommy, the kid with the red cap, had snuck to his bedroom window, his nose pressed to the glass. He'd seen the bikers ride off fast, and he whispered, "Whoa, Max is awesome." Even Mrs. Carter from the grocery store was locking up late, her head tilted, listening to the quiet that followed all that chaos. Sarah and Max didn't stop to explain. They didn't need to. They just kept walking, heading out of the parking lot, back toward their little house. The night was cool now, the breeze picking up, rustling the weeds and making the air smell fresh. Sarah's cane tapped a steady beat, tap, 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 and Max's paw slapped the ground beside her. They were a team, a perfect pair, and they just won a battle without even trying hard. The bikers thought they'd teach Sarah a lesson, but Max taught them one instead, one they wouldn't forget. Let's picture Razor again, just for fun. He's riding away, his bike wobbling a little because his hands are shaky. His jacket's still got dirt on it, and his chest hurts where Max's paws hit him. He's thinking, a Navy SEAL dog. Are you kidding me? He'd never admit it, but he's scared, real scared. His buddies are behind him, yelling stuff like, "That was crazy," and "I'm not going back there." They're all rattled, their tough guy acts smashed to bits. Razor wanted to be the big boss, the guy everyone feared. Now, he's just a guy who got flattened by a dog, and not just any dog, but a hero dog. Sarah didn't care what Razor thought. She didn't care about any of them. She just wanted to get home, sit in her chair, and pet Max like she did every night. The parking lot was behind them now, the gas station fading into the dark. The street lights buzzed overhead, casting little yellow pools of light on the sidewalk. Sarah's house wasn't far, just a few more blocks, past the diner with the wobbly sign, past the park with the rusty swings. She knew the way, even without seeing it. Max knew it too, guiding her smooth and easy, like always. But this night wasn't like always, not really. It was the night the secret came out, the night Max showed his true colors. Those bikers had pushed and pushed, thinking Sarah was weak, thinking Max was nothing. They were wrong, dead wrong, and now they knew it. Sarah's voice, steady as steel, still echoed in the air, "You should have left us alone." Max's snarl still hung there too, a sound that said, "Don't mess with us." Together, they turned the tables, flipped the whole story upside down, and sent the bikers running with their tails between their legs. So, who's laughing now? Not Razor. Not his gang. Maybe you are, though, picturing that big tough biker flat on his back, a dog standing over him like a king. Or maybe you're cheering for Sarah and Max, the quiet lady and her hero dog who didn't need to shout to win. This was the big moment, the climax, the reveal, and it's not over yet. The story's got more to tell, more to show, and it's all coming up next. Stick with me, because Sarah and Max, they're just getting started. The bikers didn't stick around long after Max showed them who's boss. Oh no, they scattered like scared kids running from a spooky shadow. Their big, loud motorcycles screeched off into the night, tires squealing on the pavement, engines roaring as they zoomed away fast. Dust flew up behind them, swirling in the dark like a big, messy cloud. They didn't look back, not once. Razor, their tough guy leader, was still on the ground when it started. He didn't even try to get up until Max stepped off him, nice and slow, like he was saying, "You're done now." Razor just lay there, sprawled in the dirt, shaking like a leaf in the wind. His fancy leather jacket was all dusty, his mean grin gone, and his hands trembled as he pushed himself up. Max stood by Sarah, his big paws planted firm, his sharp eyes watching Razor scramble. Sarah's voice was still in the air, calm and strong, saying, "You should have left us alone." Razor didn't argue. He didn't yell or try to act tough. He just got to his feet, brushed off some dirt, and stumbled to his bike. His buddies were already riding off, their engines fading into the night, and Razor didn't waste time. He jumped on his motorcycle, revved it loud, vroom, and took off after them, wobbling a little like he couldn't ride straight. They were gone, just like that, swallowed up by the dark streets, leaving the empty parking lot quiet again. Sarah stood there for a moment, her cane tapping once against the ground. Max wagged his tail just a little like he was happy with how things turned out. The air was cool now, the breeze blowing soft, and the stars were popping out in the purple sky. The lot was peaceful, like nothing had happened, but something had happened, something big. Sarah didn't say much more. She didn't need to. She just patted Max's head, her fingers scratching his scruffy fur, and said, "Let's go home." Max huffed, like he agreed, and they started walking, slow and steady, out of the parking lot and back toward their little house. By morning, the whole town was buzzing. Word spread fast, faster than a kid running to tell a secret. Everyone heard about what happened in that parking lot. People woke up, stepped outside, and started talking. Mr. Jenkins, the old guy from the hardware store, was sweeping his porch when he told his neighbor, "That dog flattened Razor like a pancake." His neighbor's eyes got wide, and she ran to tell her sister. Little Tommy, the kid with the red cap, rode his bike up and down the street, shouting, "Max is a superhero. He beat the bikers." Kids at the park stopped swinging to listen, their mouths open like they couldn't believe it. Mrs. Carter from the grocery store was behind her counter, ringing up a customer, when she said, "Sarah's dog? He's a Navy SEAL K9. Took down those mean guys in 2 seconds flat." The customer nodded, grabbing his bread, and said, "I heard Razor was shaking like a baby." By lunchtime, every house, every shop, every corner of town knew the story. People whispered it over coffee at the diner, told it while fixing cars at the gas station, and shouted it across fences in their yards. Sarah and Max weren't just Sarah and Max anymore, they were famous. The sheriff showed up around noon. He was a big guy with a white hat and a shiny badge, always smiling like he knew everything. He drove his old truck right up to Sarah's little house, the tires crunching on the gravel. Sarah was outside, sitting on her creaky porch, Max lying by her feet. The sheriff stepped out, tipped his hat to her, and grinned big. "Morning, Sarah," he said, his voice all cheerful. "Heard you had some excitement last night. Looks like Max handled things just fine." Sarah smiled a little, just a tiny one, and nodded. "He always does," she said, her hand resting on Max's head. Max wagged his tail, thump, thump, and looked up at the sheriff like he was saying, "Yup, That's me. The sheriff laughed, a deep, happy sound. Well, I reckon those bikers won't be back anytime soon, he said. Max scared em good. He bent down, looking at Max with a big grin. You're a tough one, aren't you, boy? Max tilted his head, his ears perking up, and let out a little huff. The sheriff straightened up and tipped his hat again. You two take care now, he said. Holler if you need me. Then he climbed back in his truck and drove off, the engine rumbling soft as he waved out the window. Sarah didn't say much, just patted Max again and listened to the quiet. From then on, things changed in town. People didn't just pass Sarah by like they used to. Before, she'd walk down the street with her cane tapping, Max guiding her, and folks wouldn't even look up. They'd nod or mumble hi sometimes, but that was it. She was just the quiet blind lady with her dog, nothing special, nothing new. But now? Oh, now it was different. People waved big when they saw her coming. Hey, Sarah, they'd call out, smiling wide. Hi, Max. Kids would run up, giggling, asking, can we pet your dog? Old folks would stop and chat, saying stuff like, heard about last night, good for you. And Max? He got treats, lots of treats. Little Tommy brought him a biscuit one day, holding it out with a shy grin. This is for beating those mean guys, he said. Max took it gentle, crunching it up while Tommy laughed. Mrs. Carter from the store started keeping a little jar of dog snacks by her counter. For our hero, she'd say, tossing one to Max when Sarah came in. Even Mr. Jenkins, who didn't like dogs much, pulled a bone from his shop one afternoon. Guess you earned this, Mutt, he grumbled, but his eyes twinkled like he was proud. Max wagged his tail every time, happy as can be, munching away while Sarah smiled quiet next to him. The quiet woman and her dog weren't so quiet anymore, they were legends. Kids at school drew pictures of Max, big and strong, chasing bikers away with his teeth showing. They'd stick them on the fridge at home or show them to Sarah when she walked by. Look, I drew Max, they'd yell, hopping up and down. Sarah couldn't see the pictures, but she'd nod and say, sounds like you got him just right. Teachers talked about it too, telling their classes, that's what happens when you pick on the wrong folks. Everyone knew Sarah and Max now, not just as the blind lady and her guide dog, but as the toughest team in town. And those bikers? They never came back. Not a single one. No more loud engines, no more mean laughs, no more leather jackets stomping around. People said they heard the bikers rode all the way out of the county that night, maybe even farther. Razor and his gang didn't want anything to do with Sarah or Max anymore. Guess they learned their lesson the hard way. Don't mess with a lady and her dog when that dog's a Navy SEAL canine. They'd pushed and pushed, thinking they could scare Sarah, thinking Max was nothing. Boy, did they get a surprise. Now, they were gone, and the town was peaceful again. No rumbling bikes, no yelling, just quiet days and happy nights. Let's imagine where those bikers went for a minute. Picture Razor, riding fast down some dark road, his hands still shaky on the handlebars. His jacket's dirty, his chest sore, and his tough guy voice all gone. His buddies are behind him, yelling over the wind, that dog was crazy, and I'm never going back there. Maybe they stopped at some gas station miles away, their bikes lined up, their heads low. What do we do now? The short guy might have asked, his belly jiggling as he paced. We don't tell nobody about this, Razor probably growled, his face red. They didn't want anyone to know they got beat by a dog, but secrets like that don't stay secret long. Word travels, even out there. Back in town, life got better for Sarah and Max. They'd walk the streets like always, but now it felt different. The sun seemed brighter, the air fresher, the people friendlier. Sarah's little house with the chipped paint and creaky porch felt safer too. She'd sit out there sometimes, Max by her feet, listening to the crickets and sipping tea. Neighbors would wave from their yards, kids would ride by on bikes shouting, "Hi, Max," and the whole town felt like it was smiling. Sarah didn't need to say much, she never did. She just kept being herself, quiet and strong, with Max right beside her. One day, a week later, the sheriff stopped by again. He had a little box in his hand, wrapped in brown paper. Got something for Max, he said, tipping his hat. Sarah tilted her head, curious, and the sheriff opened the box. Inside was a shiny metal, not real gold, but it looked cool, with a star on it. "Made it myself," he said, grinning. "For the toughest dog in town." He bent down and clipped it to Max's harness, right where everyone could see. Max wagged his tail thump, thump, and sat up straight, like he knew it was special. Sarah smiled, bigger this time, and said, "Thanks, Sheriff." "He likes it?" The sheriff laughed and drove off, leaving them to enjoy the day. The metal jingled when Max walked, a little clink-clink that made people smile. Kids pointed at it, saying, "Look, Max is a hero." Old folks nodded, muttering, "Darn right he is." Sarah didn't mind the attention not too much, anyway. She'd pet Max and say, "You earned that, boy," and he'd huff like he agreed. The town wasn't just a sleepy little place anymore, it was Sarah and Max's town, a place where bullies didn't win, and quiet strength did. Days turned into weeks, and the story grew. People added bits to it, like how Max jumped 10 feet to tackle Razor, he didn't, but it sounded cool, or how Sarah stared the bikers down with her blind eyes, she didn't need to. It became a tale everyone loved, a legend about a lady and her dog who stood up to the meanest guys around and sent them running. Sarah didn't care about the extra stuff. She just liked her quiet life with Max, knowing they were safe, knowing they'd won. So that's how it ended, justice served, big time. The bikers were gone, scared off for good. Sarah and Max were heroes, loved by everyone. The town learned a lesson too: don't judge people by how they look, because the quiet ones might surprise you. Sarah kept walking her streets, cane tapping, Max guiding, and the world felt right. Guess those bikers learned the hard way: mess with Sarah and Max, and you'll wish you hadn't. So, here we are, the end of Sarah and Max's big adventure. What a wild ride, right? Those mean bikers thought they could push Sarah around, but Max showed them who's boss, and now the town sees them as heroes. But before we say goodbye, let's stop and think about what the story really means. What's the takeaway here? What can we learn from Sarah and Max? Well, I've got some ideas, and I bet you do too. Let's figure it out together, step by step, and see how this story can make us smile and maybe even make us a little braver. First off, here's the big thing: sometimes the ones you think are weak are the strongest of all. Think about Sarah for a sec. She's quiet, she's blind, she walks slow with her cane, tap, 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 and nobody paid much attention to her before. People passed her by every day, not even looking twice. They saw her dark sunglasses, her simple blue dress, and thought, "Oh, she's just a regular lady. Nothing special." And Max? He's a big, scruffy dog with a wagging tail, cute, sure, but nobody thought he was tough. The bikers laughed at them, called them names, acted like they were nothing. Boy, were they wrong. See, Sarah didn't look strong, not the way Razor did, with his loud voice and big boots. She didn't shout or fight every day. She didn't need to. She just kept going, calm and steady, doing her thing with Max by her side. And Max? He didn't bark all the time or chase the bikers around. He waited, stayed smart, and watched them with those sharp eyes of his. They didn't show off or try to prove anything until it mattered. Then, bam! Max jumped, pinned Razor down, and Sarah told them straight, "You should have left us alone." That's strength, not loud and flashy, but quiet and real, popping out when you least expect it. Let's picture that moment again, just for fun. Razor's flat on his back in the parking lot, dust all over his fancy jacket, his mean grin gone. Max is standing over him, growling like thunder, holding him down like he's light as a feather. Sarah's right there, standing tall, her voice strong as steel. The other bikers? They're frozen, their jaws dropped, their tough act falling apart. Who'd have thought a blind lady and her dog could do that? Not them. Not the town. But that's the trick: sometimes the people who seem ordinary, the ones you don't notice, are the ones with the biggest surprises up their sleeves. So, what's that mean for us? Well, next time you see someone who looks regular, like a kid at school who's quiet, or a neighbor who doesn't talk much, think twice. Don't just pass them by and think, "Oh, they're nothing special." They might have a hero by their side, ready to surprise the world. Maybe they're super smart, or really brave, or good at something you'd never guess. Like Sarah, they might not show it every day. Like Max, they might wait for the right moment to shine. You never know who's got a secret strength hiding inside, just waiting to come out. Think about your own life for a minute. Do you know someone like that? Maybe a friend who's shy but always helps when you need it? Or a pet like a dog or a cat who seems lazy but jumps up fast if you're sad? I bet you've seen it before, someone who doesn't look big or loud, but turns out to be amazing. That's what Sarah and Max teach us. Strength isn't always about being the loudest or the toughest looking. Sometimes it's about being patient, staying cool, and knowing when to stand up. That's pretty cool, right? Let's talk about Max a little more, because he's the star of this twist. Could you have guessed his secret? I mean, really, did you think that scruffy dog wagging his tail was a retired Navy SEAL canine? When we first met him, he was just trotting along, guiding Sarah, looking all friendly and calm. His fur was messy, his harness was old, and he didn't bark at every little thing. He seemed like a regular guide dog, helpful, sure, but not a fighter. Then whoa, he jumped on Razor, fast as lightning, and showed he was trained to take down bad guys tougher than any biker. That's a secret worth keeping. Imagine if you'd been in that town, watching it all happen. You're walking by, maybe eating an ice cream, and you see Sarah and Max heading to the parking lot. Then the bikers roll in, loud and mean, and you think, oh no, they're in trouble. You'd never guess what's coming. You'd never think Max could move that fast, or that Sarah could sound so strong. It's like a movie twist. You're surprised, but it makes perfect sense once you know. Max didn't need to show off every day. He saved it for when it counted, and that's why he's a hero. What about you? Could you have guessed it? Be honest. If you saw a quiet lady and her dog, would you think, that dog might be a soldier? Probably not. Most of us wouldn't. We'd see the cane, the harness, the slow walk, and figure they're just regular folks. That's what the bikers did, and look where it got them, running away scared. So maybe that's another lesson: don't judge people too quick. Give them a chance to show who they really are. You might be amazed at what you find out. Let's pretend you're in Sarah's shoes for a sec. You're walking along, minding your own business, and some bullies start picking on you. They laugh, they yell, they act big and tough. What do? Do you yell back? Do you run? Or do you wait, like Sarah did, staying calm until the right moment? It's not easy, I know that. When someone's mean, you want to shout or cry or tell them off. But Sarah didn't. She kept her cool, day after day, even when Razor shoved her or blocked her path. She trusted Max, and Max trusted her, and together they waited for the perfect time to strike. That's smart and it's strong. Now imagine you've got a Max by your side, not a dog, maybe, but something or someone who makes you feel brave. Could be a best friend who sticks up for you, a teacher who believes in you, or even a little voice inside that says, you got this. We all have our own Max, don't we? Something that helps us when things get tough. For Sarah, it was her real dog, a Navy SEAL canine who knew just what to do. For you, it might be different, but it's there. And when you find it, you can be like Sarah, quiet until it matters, then strong as anything. Let's think about the town too. Before all this, people didn't pay Sarah much mind. She was just there, walking her streets, living her life. After Max took down Razor, though, everyone saw her different. They waved, brought treats, called her a hero. Kids drew pictures, old folks smiled, and the sheriff gave Max a medal. It's like the whole town woke up and said, wow, we missed something big. That shows us another thing: sometimes it takes a surprise to make people notice what's right in front of them. Sarah and Max were always awesome, but it took one wild night to prove it. So, what's that mean for us? Maybe we should look around more. Notice the quiet kid at the lunch table, the neighbor who keeps to themselves, the pet who's always by your side. They might not shout or show off, but they could be hiding something special. Like Sarah, they might be strong in their own way. Like Max, they might be ready to jump in when you need them. We don't always see it at first, but if we watch, if we really look, we might find heroes all around us. Let's dream a little now. What if you were Sarah? You're walking with your own Max, maybe a dog, maybe a friend, and some bullies show up. They laugh, they tease, they think you're nothing. But you've got a secret, just like Sarah did. You wait, you stay smart, and then bam, you show them you're tougher than they'll ever be. How would that feel? Pretty great, right? You wouldn't need to fight every day or yell all the time. You just know your strength, keep it close, and use it when it counts. That's what Sarah and Max did, and it worked big time. Or what if you're Max? You're by your best friend's side, looking all regular and chill, but deep down you're ready to protect them. You watch, you wait, and when the moment comes, you leap fast and fierce and save the day. You don't need to bark or brag. You just do it, and everyone's amazed. That's Max's magic. He didn't show off until he had to, and when he did, nobody could forget it. Could you be like that? Quiet until it's time, then strong as a superhero? I bet you could. Here's one more thing to chew on: the bikers got it wrong because they judged too fast. Razor saw Sarah's cane, Max's wagging tail, and thought, easy target. He didn't stop to wonder. He didn't ask, who are they really? He just laughed and pushed, and it cost him. That's a lesson too. Don't be like Razor. Don't think you know everything about someone just by looking. You might miss the truth, and that truth might knock you flat. So, what do you think? Could you have guessed Max's secret? I'd love to hear. If you were here with me, I'd say, tell me below, what did you think Max was gonna do? Maybe you'd say, I knew he was special, or no way, I thought he was just a dog. Either way, it's fun to wonder. This story's all about surprises: Sarah's toughness, Max's power, the way they turned everything around. It makes you think about who's strong, who's brave, and who might be hiding a hero inside. Let's wrap it up with this: Sarah and Max didn't need to shout or fight every day. They waited, stayed smart, and struck when it mattered. That's real strength, the kind that lasts. Next time you see someone who seems ordinary, think twice. They might have a hero by their side, ready to surprise the world. And maybe, just maybe, you've got that strength too, waiting for your moment to shine. So keep your eyes open, stay kind, and be ready for anything. Because like Sarah and Max showed us, the quiet ones can change everything.